Recently, we discussed the apparent insanity of China and Russia not reaching an agreement to build a pipeline that ought to make both of them substantial amounts of money. What we did not discuss much was how Ukraine's long-running and long-distance anti-infrastructure campaign might have factored into the failed negotiations. Indeed, the only discussion regarding Ukraine that we had was how Russia's economy has taken a tumble, leaving the Kremlin with insufficient capital to invest in the project. That, in turn, caused Russian officials to want China to front the capital costs. But China worries that Russia will not pay them back with a sweetheart deal on the gas later. To use a term of art, the Kremlin's inability to commit to a deal holds up the investment. Meanwhile, if we zoom out to the broader world at war, there is all the more reason to care about investment questions. Gulf partners have plenty of concern about Iran striking their own energy infrastructure. Thus, on today's edition of the Geopolitics Helpline, we examine a pair of questions from a pair of viewers on similar topics. One is the situation with Russia's pipeline, and the other is the cause of the Iran war. Here is the first. When you mentioned hold-up problems, I thought you were going to say that the investment never happens because any pipeline risks being destroyed by Ukraine in the short term, so the investment never occurs. Is that not the case due to escalation risks? And here is the second question regarding Iran. You may recognize it from an earlier Geopolitics Helpline video, as I originally misread it and answered my own version. Sorry. But this time, we will do the real one. The standard crisis bargaining model assumes that war is costly. But how often does that break, and it is actually peace that is costly? Having a potentially aggressive rival neighbor discourages investment. For example, there is doubt about whether the United Arab Emirates will manage to rebuild its financial and tourism sectors after the war, given the looming Iranian threat, assuming a hostile regime stays in power. I have discussed the general idea of wars as a consequence of hold-up problems before, especially as it relates to Venezuela and oil. But as I was thinking about the specific problems that Russia and the Gulf states face, I sketched out a similar way to obtain conditions where war occurs that is also a better match for what is happening here. I am actually really pleased with myself right now, because I think it is worth adding to the Formal Models of Crisis Bargaining textbook if I ever release a second edition. That's right, YouTube questions are leading to new peer-reviewed research, and Yins are the first ones to see it. #science. Anyway, take your standard lines on maps case. Here is the expected outcome of war. Russia is willing to accept anything west of the red line, which is subtracting out its costs. Let's further imagine that Ukraine has all of the proposal power, so it can hold Russia to that minimum. Side note, proposal power is actually critical to crisis bargaining. I did a whole video about it a while back that did not get many views, so if you are serious about this stuff and missed that video, then check it out after today's video. In any case, now let's imagine that Russia can make an investment, which has three qualities. First, it will cost some money. Second, it will bring a return on investment. And third, Ukraine will be able to impose greater costs of war on Russia after the fact. Think of this as damaging the pipeline, which will cause profits from the investment to drop. Obviously, for any of this to matter at all, the revenue brought in from the investment must be greater than the capital cost. For our applied purposes, I want to note here that this difference is already tight, because Russia does not have much liquid cash right now. But let's go with it. Even if the investment is economically profitable, it still might not be a good idea for Russia. Remember, post-investment, Ukraine can impose greater costs on Russia, say by blowing up parts of the pipeline. Consequently, there is a hidden price to pay for investing beyond the capital cost. So, if the revenue from the investment is greater than both the capital cost and the extra coercive cost, then you should be willing to go through with it. The visualization here cannot make that explicit because it requires a comparison between money and the value of territory. As you all know by now, though, the cost of war reflects how much the state values the territory relative to other metrics, like money. So this still works in principle, even if it is hard to visualize. Never mind that 400 rubles is basically no money whatsoever. Unfortunately for Ukraine, there is a third option that Russia can adopt. If you could fight a war, hope to disable Ukraine's coercive capacity, and then base your investment decision on what happens in combat, you might be able to come out better. In particular, this is a good strategy when the investment is economically profitable, but the coercive cost is expensive. Basically, the trade-off is that you can guarantee a successful investment if you are willing to eat what Ukraine coerces out of you. Or you can risk military defeat and get a better return conditional on winning. When the risky strategy is better, you get war. The underlying mechanism is a commitment problem. If Ukraine could credibly commit to not leveraging the extra coercive power post-investment, then Russia would not fight up front. Okay, that is the theory. How about in practice for Russia? Might the Kremlin be continuing to fight in Ukraine so that it can know whether it is a good idea to invest in the power of Siberia too? I have no doubt that this thought is a part of the strategic discussions inside the Kremlin, but I do not think that it is a pivotal factor. The pipeline would be incredibly far away from Ukrainian-held territory. For perspective, these are some of the furthest northeast that Ukraine's attacks have gone. I have no doubt that Ukraine could develop the ability to strike a pipeline that far away, though perhaps this is another argument why settling sooner would be better for Russia. But there are two other problems with the theory. One, pipelines are relatively easy to repair. And two, there are better targets closer to Ukraine, like the oil terminals along the Baltic Sea. Even if Ukraine knew that Russia was leaving the pipeline unguarded, it is unclear whether Ukraine would want to bother. Now, this does raise a question of whether Russia will be forever held up on other projects closer to the border with Ukraine. But at least insofar as the conversation regarding China goes, the bargaining problems specifically with China are a better explanation for what is happening with the lack of an agreement to build the pipeline. After all, it was those bargaining problems that caused the two to fail to reach a deal long ago, and long before anyone thought that Ukraine conducting deep strikes on Russia was remotely plausible. On the other hand, there may be something to this argument as it relates to the Gulf region. When the possibility of a war came into the picture back in January, the Gulf Coast states wanted Trump to pump the brakes because they feared what damage Iran could inflict on their oil infrastructure, mostly the ports, refineries, and fields. After the United States deployed more defensive assets and the war began, their posture shifted to tepid curiosity. There was hope that Iran would be completely broken, and they could invest to their heart's content. Now, whether this mechanism was critical to the war happening is unclear, because it involves a convoluted story where the United States internalizes the benefits of Gulf partners investing in the oil industry. Bear in mind that the United States is now a net oil exporter, and lower oil supplies mean greater profits. In contrast, consumers benefit from higher supplies. On net, consumer sentiment is the more critical political concern, and it is probably better for the overall US economy too if there's more oil to go around. But it is not as stark of a benefit as it was 30 years ago. Also, the ceasefire, began well before Iran's capacity had been destroyed. So either the theory is not a good fit for this case, or the United States decided that attriting Iran to that level was not feasible. At least on the latter point, it seems that the Gulf partners' attitude has changed once more to be more interested in a way out, in large part because the continued closure of Hormuz is also problematic for them. So take that as you will. Alternatively, this will can take you on a tour of the Geopolitics Helpline archive, which is full of interesting questions. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.